This card game, Gudnak, has quickly become one of my favorite games of the last few years, and not enough people are talking about it. It has great art, a very flavorful theme, and very snappy, impactful mechanics that are just a lot of fun to use. In fact, I like it so much that it has essentially replaced another game that I have in my collection, which is Summoner Wars. I find these games really interesting because of how many similarities they have. They're both card games where you play your cards onto a grid on a board, and you move them around the board in a very tactical manner similar to games like chess. They both have a fantasy battle theme, and there's tons of different decks and factions that you can collect that all play differently and take a long time to master. They both have really great art. Summoner Wars, I would say, is a little bit more cartoony. Gudnak is maybe a touch grittier. And they both have these vibrant implied settings that you explore through the cards. They're also both living card games, so they have tons of expansions and more factions that you can buy, but there's no booster boxes or randomization. You just buy the stuff that you need, and then you're good to go. As living card games, they also have some light deck building. Not something as complex as in Magic the Gathering, but you can definitely customize your armies and try out new strategies and new combos. But that's totally optional. If you want to, you can stick with the deck lists that come in each of those boxes, and those will be just fine to play with. They're also both very highly acclaimed games. Summoner Wars is sitting at, I think, an 8.0 at Board Game Geek, and Gudnak has an 8.5, although it has a lot fewer reviews because not as many people know about it, and that's something I'd like to change. Now today we're going to look through both of these and do a direct comparison, mechanic to mechanic, so you can see how these two games differ and how, in my opinion, Gudnak has improved on the standard that Summoner Wars set. If you disagree with me though and think that Summoner Wars is the better game, let me know why down in the comments below. Ready? Let's go. To begin with, let's start with the objectives for Gudnak. This is the battlefield you'll be using. Your stronghold is going to be down here on this square, and there's going to be this 3x3 area that you're going to be fighting over in the middle of the board. Your opponent's base or fortress is going to go over here on this side. On top of your fortress, you're going to put your deck of 20 cards. This is where all of your characters and your events, your spells, and that sort of thing are going to come from. Now, the objective is to make your opponent's deck run out of cards while besieging their castle. So what does that mean? Over the course of the game, you're going to be playing these characters like the Craven Prince or the Amalgam Brute or the Spectral Hunter into this area here, and they're going to be marching around the board towards your enemy's side. They can move forward, backwards, side to side, and so forth. Your opponent's characters are going to be doing the same thing. Your objective is to get your characters to their gates being this area right here in front of their base. If you get a character in front of their base, you are besieging it, and instead of drawing a card every turn, they're going to take that card and discard it, so you begin to deck them. If their deck has completely run out of cards and there is a character sieging them, then they lose the game. Now, not everyone is a big fan of this life decking strategy, but I think it works really well in this game. It creates this very concrete timer because every turn you are drawing a card or you're losing a card if you're besieged, and there's only 20 of these, so the game can't go on forever. The process of getting a character in front of their gates and slowly knocking away the cards so that they can't use them anymore is very satisfying. I also like how each of these cards on the back looks like wooden doors, so it feels like you're knocking down their gates as you're battering it. This very clear timer, along with some other mechanics we'll talk about later, makes this game very snappy. The games tend to go for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes at the most, but especially once you start getting into it, you can be knocking out games in 10-15 minutes, no problem. Meanwhile, in Summoner Wars, your objective is quite different. Instead, each player has a summoner, who's like the general or leader of their army, and your objective is simply to kill them. Like in Gudnak, there is a grid that you're moving across, but this is a much larger grid. This is a 6x8 grid, so there's a huge amount of space that you can travel around. Now, in some ways, that's kind of freeing. There's a lot of places that you can go, but in another way, it makes your choices feel a little bit less impactful. When in Gudnak, you're on a 3x3 area, your positioning matters a lot. Every time you make a move, it changes the whole configuration of battle. Whereas in this, if you have a bunch of characters moving around the battlefield here and there, it's harder to figure out exactly how that's impacting things. At least it's not quite as clear. There's also the fact that because your objective is to kill one of their characters and that character can move, it means that the game can turn into this game of chase where all the enemy units are chasing down this one summoner who just keeps running away, something that has happened in games that I've played before, and that can stretch the game out a bit. Now, this game does have a kind of built-in timer, and how it works in this one is that if you decide to make no attacks during your turn, and you just build up your defenses and barricade yourself and turtle, what happens is that your summoner starts taking damage. 1 damage every turn that you're not being aggressive. That's really good because it does mean the game won't go on forever, but you do have 12 hit points on your character, and a lot of times you're going to be making attacks during your turn, so this timer won't always kick in. All right, next let's take a look at the actual structure of a turn. How do you play Gudnak? But first, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Hexadome Tactics, the new turn-based video game set in the iconic Infinity tabletop universe, which you can wishlist now on Steam. Build a team of champions and compete in the Hexadome, an arena inspired by the Aristia board game where every decision can turn the tide of the match. Use careful positioning, cover, and smart tactics to move your characters across the hex grid and claim victory. Hype up the crowd and complete sponsor objectives to unlock tactical cards that give you even more options. The game is launching in September, so make sure to wishlist it right now using the link in the description below. All right, so how does a turn of Gudnak actually function? So you're going to have your cards in your hand, and these cards are either going to be these action cards or they're going to be these character cards. And turns are very straightforward. You have 2 actions, you take your 2 actions, then you're done. What are some actions that you can do? Well, you can play one of these action cards. The number up here in the corner is how many actions that takes up. So if you played this, that would be your whole turn. You've used up 2 actions, although some have 1 and some are completely free to use. You could also play a character. Characters are always played in one of these 3 starting squares, and you just slap them down and you're done. There is no resource system. The balance of the game comes from the way that deck construction works, where you have to have a certain number of weak and strong guys. I'm not going to get into that in detail. What else can you do? You can move. Let's say you have some guys out here. You can move them 1 space in any orthogonal direction. I should also point out one other thing about playing characters, which is that you are allowed to stack characters on top of each other. So if I have this character here and he has this arrow symbol, I could play this character on top of him, and now there's 2 guys moving around in this little miniature army. Only the top guy is really active or can do anything. Other actions you might take include attacking. I'll get into more detail on that later. Or using an action that is on the character itself. For example, this character has an action with a little plus sign inside it, where you can take an action here and put all basic 1s, that means level 1 characters, from your graveyard underneath this fighter, making this big shambling undead horde. You can spend an action to draw another card from your deck if you want to have more cards in your hand, although of course this will bring you closer to decking yourself, so that's a trade-off you have to keep in mind. And you can also defend. Defending is when there is an enemy attacking your fortress. Let's say that this is an enemy guy attacking my fortress. Here's my deck right here. I could decide to defend, and this is a level 2 character, so I could lose 2 cards from my deck to instantly kill him. If there was a big stack of guys attacking me though, something like this, then it would just kill the guy on top, and I'd have to kill the next guy on the next turn, and so forth. So having a big stack of guys assaulting an enemy castle is a really good idea. Meanwhile, Summoner Wars is much stricter about how you go about having a battle. For one thing, it has a resource system, which is tracked right here on the board. And resources are always very tight. You're going to be gaining magic either by discarding cards from your hand, which is going to slowly run you out of cards in your deck. That won't lose you the game, but you'll just be out of cards. And you also get some magic from killing enemy units. But the bigger difference is that there is a very clear turn structure down here at the bottom of the board that you go through every time it's your turn. Now, on the one hand, that's really nice. It's nice to have the turn structure printed on the board so players don't have to refer to a player aid. That's actually really great when you're learning the game. But in games that I've played, especially when I was teaching other people, they would often get frustrated by having all of these steps that had to be performed in order. So let's go through each of these really quickly. Start of your turn, discard any active events. You have some event cards that are ongoing. You get rid of those. Next, you summon units adjacent to your gate. So you'd pay the cost, however much they cost. That's the number that's right there. And then they go down next to one of your gates on the board. You can summon as many units as you want as long as you can pay for it. Next, you move. You can pick up to 3 of your characters and move them up to 2 spaces. So 1, 2, 1, 2, etc. Next, building. You can build structures. Structures are usually gates, but there are some other cards that can be structures. And you can build gates anywhere that you want in your back 3 rows right here, or anywhere next to your summoner. So if your summoner gets deep into enemy territory, you can start building gates and structures over there, which can be very advantageous. Next, you make your attacks. Again, we'll talk about attacks later when we compare that to how Gudnak does it, but up to 3 people can attack, and then that's it for them. Finally, you can gain more magic. So if you have cards in your hand, discard as many as you want, gain that much magic, and then draw back up to 5 cards. This was a bit of a mixed bag for me. In one sense, it's not really that big of a deal that you just do things in this order, but it can also be frustrating when you have a clever idea and it's only going to work if you execute it in the order that you want and the phases don't go in that order. Like, what if it's important that you build a structure and then you move some characters? Well, too bad, you can't do that. Maybe you wanted to make some attacks so that you could gain some magic so that you could use that to summon some units. Also not allowed. In Gudnak, the system of just take 2 actions, any 2 actions that you want, is very easy to understand and very quick to teach. And it allows for a lot more flexibility and creativity when it comes to how you're going to plan out what you're going to do on your turn. One other big difference is that in Summoner Wars, there's effectively no summoning sickness like in Magic. It's perfectly fine to summon a character. Let's say you just put this guy down next to one of your gates, boom, and then move him around the board and then make him attack someone. That's all totally fine. Meanwhile, in Gudnak, each character can basically only do one thing. If you play them on the board, they're there until next turn. If you move them, then they're done. They can't make any extra attacks on top of that. But I think a lot of that is because in Gudnak, the board is so much smaller. The space that your character is taking up makes a very big difference in terms of how people are going to move and what their plans are going to be. Whereas the board is so big here, you kind of have to be able to play guys and move them really quickly just to get everyone into position. I think that can also make this game a little bit swingier because people can just slap down a whole bunch of units, zoom around, and then attack a bunch of people at once. Whereas in Gudnak, you can kind of see where everyone is, you know where they can place their units, and you know that they can only take one action each. So it's a little bit easier to plan ahead because you see what the possibilities are more clearly on the enemy side. All right, next let's look at how attacking works in each of these games, because this makes a very big difference in the tactics and the feel of the game. Let's say that we have our undead army over here and being attacked by this ogre brute over on this side. When one character decides to attack another, they have to be adjacent to each other, and you just compare their level or their number at the top. This is a level 1 character, this is a level 2. Combat is completely deterministic. You just compare the numbers. If they're equal, then they both die. If one is higher, then they kill the other person. And if you kill the other side, what you do is they die and you move into their spot. That's really important. It's a little bit like chess that way. You have to keep in mind the text of the cards though. For example, what this guy says is that he has a +1 when attacking soldiers. This is not a soldier, this is a hunter. There's 3 basic kinds of units. You have brutes, hunters, and soldiers. And there's a kind of rock, paper, scissors thing going on. This is where brutes beats soldiers, soldiers beat hunters, and hunters beat brutes. Or at least they get a +1. So if this guy attacked him, that's not going to work out for him. But if he's over here and decided to attack, he has a +1 against soldiers, which this guy is. So he's effectively a 2 instead of a 1, and he would win that fight. This guy would die, but because there's a stack here, he wouldn't be able to move into his spot. You'd have to attack again next turn. So the core of the game is keeping track of not only what level everyone is, but which of those 3 types they are, so that you can maneuver your guys into just the right position, that you get these advantages while attacking. And they typically only apply while you're attacking. If you are being attacked, you usually do not get that bonus. Make sure to read the cards though. There are some special cards that do their own things. The total lack of randomness is something that I like about this game. It makes things very clear. You can see how your strategy is going to play out ahead of time. The only randomness is what they have in their hand. You have to think ahead and think like, if this guy was here and he attacked him, that would leave this lane open, then someone could move down here and take out this guy because I see that he has a big guy up here and there's an ability that moves him 2 spaces forward. It's all very tight and very constrained. It's a very clear puzzle that you can work out ahead of time, and I love that about it. Also, there's the fact that characters don't have any hit points. Everyone just dies in 1 hit if a more powerful character attacks them. This keeps everything really snappy. There's never a slog to combat. There's always something important that happens. One of them is going to die or both of them are going to die. Now, how does combat work in Summoner Wars? Well, we have 2 different values here. We have either bows or swords. This just means ranged combat. For a ranged attack, you can shoot at anyone who is within 3 spaces orthogonally. So this character could shoot this person up to here or up to 3 spaces that way, as long as they have clear line of sight. If they have a melee symbol, then someone has to be right next to them in order to make an attack. And these attacks are dice-based. So if this character made an attack up to here, you're going to need to roll 2 dice, and you're looking for that bow symbol on the dice. So I rolled there, I got 2 bows, I'm going to do 2 damage. You're going to put those tokens right on it. Meanwhile, let's say this character was here and was going to make an attack against the Citadel Knight. There's a 3 with a sword. So we're going to look for sword symbols, and we got 2 swords. We're going to do 2 damage. Now, some people like dice, some people do not. One thing to keep in mind is that these are not quite as random as you think. To their credit, they are mostly going to succeed, which does help with planning. When it comes to the sword symbols, 5 of the 6 sides are swords. So a 3 sword means you're usually going to do 3 damage, but as you saw, sometimes you only do 2. And when it comes to the bows have 4 of the 5 sides, so you have a 2/3 chance of hitting with each die. There's also some lightning bolt symbols that are on half of the sides. Those only trigger on certain effects that will tell you that they matter. The effect that rolling dice for combat has means that it is just not deterministic the way that Gudnak is. You're never totally sure how much damage you're going to do, how effective the choice is that you just made. I have this big plan to push through the enemy lines, but it might not work out if the dice don't go my way. There's an element of risk there that some people like. But there's also a kind of mushiness that creates that some people really don't. And I found that was causing some problems for me while I was playing. This is especially true because people have quite a few hit points, 5 hit points, 7, 12 for your summoners, which means that when you make an attack, you're oftentimes not killing them even if you do hit. Sometimes it'll take 2, maybe 3 hits before you actually finish someone off. So you can have situations where you have a bunch of fights going on, but it takes several turns before you make any meaningful headway. And this in turn can mean that the game takes longer. This is something that my son and I noticed when we were playing, is that you'd be playing for a while and it feels like, is this a 2-player dueler? We should be done now, but there's still lots of guys on the board and they have plenty of hit points. And you think, okay, this is going to take another half hour to really wade through all of this. I feel like it does kind of overstay its welcome a little bit, especially as a 2-player tactical game. But other people are going to enjoy the granularity of having these different hit point trackers that you're seeing all over the board. Oh, this guy's almost dead. He's in a very weak position. I should retreat him, maybe move this guy forward to take his place. Can I actually push this guy into this enemy zone when he has so many hit points left? You're thinking about stuff like that. But it's just harder to read the board at a glance and make these very clear, smart decisions where you can see ahead of time how it's going to play out. Overall, I think that between these two designs, Gudnak is the more successful when it comes to these war game card games. It's smoother, it's punchier, you feel smarter when you come up with a great plan, and I even like the design and the art a bit more. The core box comes with 4 different factions. You have these underground kind of evil cultist dwarves. You have like the good guys who are like these sun-worshipping knights that have lots of dog tokens that you can send out that fly around in griffins and things like that. There's the undead horde that I showed you. And then there's another group of forest dwellers that are like cockatrices and centaurs and orcs and people all sort of piled together defending the forest realm from all these invaders. But there's plenty of expansions out there that add a bunch of new people that you can play as, and they all look great. All the art is done by one person, and every card has unique art. There's even a backside to this board that redesigns it for 4 players, which means you can take it to board game night, which is really awesome. There's even really crazy experimental stuff that the Gudnak people are doing. For example, they are selling boxes of booster packs. And you might ask yourself, why on earth would I buy that? This is a living card game where you get every copy of all of the cards just by buying the core sets. And the reason is that if you buy these randomized booster packs, which are totally optional, then you get tons of alternate versions of these cards, alternate arts. You can get foil cards, you get new pictures by new artists. So if you really want to bling out your deck with cool stuff that no one has seen before, you can get those and collect them. But like I said, it's optional. You can also use these randomized packs to play draft versions of this game if you want to do that. It's a really cool experiment. I'd love to see card games try more stuff like that. In any case, I hope this got you interested in checking out Gudnak. I'll put a link down below for where you can pick this up or for where you can get Summoner Wars if that seems more like your jam. And remember to subscribe to the Questing Beast email newsletter if you want to be in the running for all of my giveaways, like this month's giveaway, The Painted Wastelands, a RPG setting that I reviewed recently. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.